Hello guys, my name is Glurmit and today I'm going to be going over 20 different Zetas that you should probably avoid applying at least until your end game and have an abundance of the resources. So let's get into the list. So to begin with, the most obvious that you guys knew was going to come is going to be Nihilus's lead, Strength of Void. Now what this Zeta is going to be doing is giving you an additional 50% health still. That's it guys, so Nihilus lead already gives you 100% health still. Nihilus lead Zeta gives you an additional 50% on top, and honestly guys, you don't need this. I would just skip this Zeta and never apply it. The next we have is Ultimate Predator. So this Zeta is on Mara's special, the one where she does the lightsaber swing and she stuns the enemy, dispels buffs, and that's about it. But what the Zeta is going to be doing for you is dealing double damage to shocked enemies and a Jedi. And honestly guys, you don't need this. I would not even bother applying this because the majority of the time you're not really running Palpatine against Jedi, and then when you're going up against shocked enemies, you're getting most of your damage through Palp and Starkiller rather than Mara herself. Yes, if you run her without Starkiller, then it'll be different, but for the most part, you don't need this Zeta. I would just skip it. The next Zeta we have is another one of Mara's, Infiltrate and Disrupt. Now this one does have some uses here guys. What it's going to be doing is every time you throw the grenade, you're going to be inflicting debuffs, and she gains stealth. But what the Zeta does is she gives turn meter to Palp. 1.25% turn meter per debuff inflicted is quite nice, but what you'll find is Palp is already gaining so much turn meter because once everyone's shocked and Mara throws her, she will take a bonus turn because of the turn meter from Palp lead, and then when she basics, Palp will basic, and then he just gains so much from all the shocks that it doesn't matter. I mean, it's nice, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. You don't need this Zeta. Next up guys, we have Pierre, and this is a Zeta where if you have Executor or if you're planning on unlocking it now within the next month or so as of watching this video, you should probably go and apply this and ignore this Zeta recommendation. But if you just have Imperial Troopers, I would recommend that you guys do not apply this, and the reason being it doesn't do that much. So what the Zeta is going to be doing is it's going to be dazing the enemy team, and on top of the daze you're also going to inflict fear on a kill. Now the daze part is really nice, but honestly most of the time you're just better off basicing, and most of the time the daze may not even land. The only time I can really think that you're going to use this is maybe against General Skywalker or maybe against Starkiller, but you can get around this without this Zeta. I just think it's not the best one ever. I feel like there's better Zetas you can apply instead. Like I said guys, if you want to go for Executor, then you're going to need this anyway, but for those of you who are maybe new to the game, this is not the Zeta you want to be going for. Okay guys, on to the next Zeta. This is one of the first ones. This is just a really useless Zeta, and this is Cody. Guys, Cody's just not being used. You would never use him as the lead. Now this Zeta is going to be doing the following. Clone allies are gaining 30% critical chance and other allies gain half. Cody then gains 60% defense for each living clone, and other clones gain half. Clone allies recover 5% of their max protection with these are basic. And the Zeta is the max protection recovery on a basic, and honestly guys, you just wouldn't use Cody lead. Maybe in 3v3 you'll get some uses, but I just wouldn't bother. This is just a Zeta that you don't really want to do. Ghost Company Commander. Then we have Wait For Me, and this is probably the first one where some of you may be scratching your heads a little bit because C-3PO typically always has both Zetas. This one you can skip for quite some time. Now what the Zeta is going to be doing is it gives C-3PO an additional stack of translation at the start of the encounter alongside with R2-D2. Now that is all the Zeta is doing. The rest of the ability is going to be giving you the escape function where C-3PO leaves the battle, but really you don't need the translation. It's not going to benefit you too much. It's a great Zeta, but it's not one you need to apply when you have limited amounts of the resource. Next up we have I Like a Challenge, which is one of Canderous' Zetas. So this Zeta is okay. Like it works weirdly in a Darth Revan and Jedi Knight Revan team. So basically what's gonna happen is when an enemy becomes death marked or marked, you're going to be gaining crit damage up for 2 turns. Alternatively, when an enemy gains taunt, you also gain crit damage up for 2 turns. Now, this can work in some circumstances, but honestly guys, this is a waste. You don't even need it for more teams to work. Like, apply it if you need it for the Malik event. If you need it to participate in Malik, sure, because you need that GP. Otherwise, skip it, guys. You don't need this Zeta, because you're not running him with Darth Revan, you're not running him with Jedi Knight Revan. The Maul team doesn't necessarily mark people or inflict death mark. It's just not that necessary, guys. You don't need this Zeta to perform well with this team. Next, we have Geonosian Swarm. This is GBA Special, guys, and what this one's going to be doing is on his AoE. And what this one's going to be doing, guys, is whenever there is an enemy with a buff, GBA is gaining offense stacking. And honestly, the lead is the stuff below the Zeta that's most important. The health increase, the protection increase, the health steal, the protection recovery. This just gives you 10% more damage per each buff enemy, but most of the time you're going to be removing the buffs because Geos just remove buffs. GBA has a AoE buff dispel, Sunfec has a buff dispel. Like, there's just no point running this Zeta. It's kind of a waste. The only time it's nice is if you go up against teams with locked buffs. Then all of a sudden it's really nice, but other than that, don't bother, guys. You can do much better. Next, we have Inspiring Through Fear. This is Darth Vader's lead, and there is a reason why I'm telling you guys not to bother applying this. In the past, the majority of the time, this was applied for people to participate in CPIT because you needed the dots to remain. This is what the Zeta is going to be doing. When you inflict a dot, the dot does not expire, it comes back. Think of it like Grand Inquisitor's Omicron on his lead, where all of a sudden the purge keeps on coming back. It's the same with Vader and dots. And whilst this can be very useful, most of the time you're not going to be running its lead. Like, and if you do, you don't really need the dots to stay because he's going to kill them in time anyway. Like, most of the time you guys are probably going to be running Palpatine lead, and then later game you're going to be running him with Afra lead. So what's the point in doing his lead? 3v3, sure, but you can do better, guys. Do his unique, do his merciless. I wouldn't really worry about his lead unless you really like him, or unless you want to have that extra team. Again, guys, some of these Zetas you can apply, they're just ones that aren't as good as you may believe they are. Next up, we have Bodhi. I couldn't have a Zeta list on what not to apply and not include Bodhi. Now, Bodhi's Zeta is really, really simple here, guys. At the end of each of his turn, Bodhi grants offense up for 2 turns to a random ally who doesn't already have it. Very simple. I'm sure it has some uses, but just don't apply it. I mean, you're probably not going to gear him, so unless you're taking him to like Relic 9, why would you even bother? I think it's a waste of a Zeta, so there's not really much else to say about this one. Okay guys, so next up we have Crackling Doom. This is Palpatine's unique ability, and what it's going to be doing is every time he hits an enemy with shock, he's going to be increasing his max protection. And honestly guys, it's not bad to have. It can make Palpatine thicker, but you don't really need it. Again, like with Pierre earlier, the way this team works is this turn meter train. So once you get rolling, they're not going to be taking turns because you're going to be inflicting stun, you're going to be inflicting shock, you're going to be reducing turn meter Amara, staggering, all of that fun stuff. You don't need this Zeta. It's a luxury Zeta for sure. Next, we have Bring Them In Cold. This is Grief's Masochist, and all the Zeta is doing is increasing the damage of the attack by 20%. It's just, look, it's decent, it's okay-ish, but don't apply it, guys. There's a reason there's only like 30% of all Gear 12 and higher Griefs have this Zeta, and it's because it's not really needed. The one you want is the Cleanse. This one is nice, but it's luxury, guys. Like 20% damage, will you really see the difference? Probably not at the lower levels of the game. Then we have Nick of Time. This is Captain Han Solo's Zeta, and what it's going to be doing is whenever he basics, he gains a minimal amount of health stacking for 3 turns. And honestly, guys, again, the way the Sana teams work is you have taunts, you have tanks, and most of the time you're going to survive. Now, you may apply this Zeta for the Jedi Knight Luke event, but if you get around without it, I would say just don't worry about it. It's not a necessary Zeta to have. I'm not saying these Zetas are bad, guys. I'm just saying they aren't the necessary ones you want for good success. Right, next up we have Child's Favor. Now this one actually has some use if you use data crunch. Now what this one is going to be doing is whenever you dispel or cleanse a debuff on your team, you're going to be inflicting dots based on the amount of debuffs cleansed. It seems very basic, and yes, I mean, it has some uses. If you have the Datacron where if you inflict dots, you gain protection up stacking, all of a sudden then this is an S-tier Zeta. If you don't have this, I wouldn't even bother applying it. It's not to say it's bad, guys, but there is much better Zetas out there you can be applying instead. Next up, we have Wall of Stormtroopers. Very similar story. What this one's going to be doing is it's going to give Stormtrooper an increase in offense for each other Imperial Trooper ally that has died or is not in the game at the current point. And then the nice part is it's going to give Imperial Remnants protection up, but you just don't need it. This is not a good Zeta. This is not a Zeta you need. I have it, it's a luxury Zeta, but you don't need this to do well, guys. Maybe in an Iden team it would be nice, but honestly guys, you don't need this Zeta. And then we have for the droids, this is one that on paper seems incredibly good. The first time a droid ally goes to 1% health, they equalize with L3, and basically it's like a droid savior. But the problem is, guys, no one really runs droids. Most people will run L3 with dash, and there's no droids in the lineup, so it's literally a wasted Zeta. Now yes, you could run this with Shorty, but guys, just remember Shorty's already got that revive mechanic in play. You don't need L3 as well. Honestly, this is just one of those weird ones where if they release some characters to make a really good droid team, or say Shorty got that booster and then all of a sudden you're running L3 in that team, then this becomes a really good Zeta. But until that point, it's just unnecessary. Most of you are running L3 with dash, and dash uses no other droids, so it's kind of like, why would you run this? Next up, we have Ceremonial Dance. This is the basic on Tusken Chieftain. Now this Zeta has some uses, especially in 3v3. Basically, every time Tusken Chieftain basics, he's going to be giving momentum to an ally, a random ally, 3 stacks of momentum. Now this is very minimal, and the point is, guys, most of the time you're going to gain so much momentum that the game will either crash or it just doesn't matter anyway. But in 3v3, you do not lose momentum on Boba Fett, Sign of Django, so having this can set you up for success earlier on. Other than that, I would just do his lead. I wouldn't even touch the basic. It's not a bad Zeta, right guys, but there's much better out there. Next up, we have Loyal Enforcer. Now this Zeta is a weird one, guys. It's for Gamorrean Guard, and this one has some use if you run the double tank lineup for Jabba, but honestly, I just wouldn't really recommend it. So what this Zeta is going to be doing is basically, guys, if the ally leader is Hut Cartel, whenever another Hut Cartel ally falls below 70% health, Gamorrean Guard has a defense up and he taunts and gains protection up to 100% for 2 turns. I mean, it's nice, it can work, it can stall your opponent, but most of the time you're going to run Embo in the 5th slot for a Hut Cartel team, and if you're not running Jabba, you're not going to want this anyway. It's a luxury Zeta, it's not one that you guys want to work on until much later in the game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the list. I tried to include some better Zetas that some of you may not have known about, and I've also tried to include some of the obvious ones, such as Bodhi. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. My name is Glurmit, and as always, have a glurming day.